So does anybody here know that song? I've never heard that song. Misa filled me in on it. So it's from this musical called Dogfight. Has anybody heard of that?
Yeah.
We got a couple of people here. Oh yeah, Misa's family.
There's a movie called Dogfight.
It's based on a movie.
So it's a musical set on this premise that these soldiers, Navy guys are on leave, and they're going to throw a party that's a dogfight. And the point of the party is to find the ugliest date and bring them. And the ugliest date wins. Horrifying. And that song is sung by the woman who wins.
Although you should hear the one she sings right after she wins. This is post-epiphany.
But what I thought was so beautiful about this song was that, and that's beautiful too, right, the process of it, but that even in the challenge of something that is so devastatingly horrifying, like right to the core of who you are, she's singing about the world. And she's singing about it as being beautiful and strange. Even in the midst of the ick, she is able to recognize something about the beauty of it because she has been changed. Because something within her has stepped out and understands life in a completely new and different way. It's really hard to sometimes see the beauty when we're in the challenging times. And I don't know about you all, but this past week has been incredibly challenging for me. Navigating everything that has been coming up, Charlottesville, Barcelona, and then also what's just going on in my life, in my jobs, right? And everything just sort of piling on. And I found myself, in my horror and in my disquiet, wanting to just shut down. Like just a part of me just wanting to just sort of blinder it all up. Like it's just too much, it's just too hard, it's just too challenging. And I've been in this teaching a long time, thank God. And so I know that in the midst of this challenge of whatever is roiled up within me, just like for this character in this story, that there is a tremendous opportunity for growth. There is something in here for me that I can heal within me. And what do we know in our teaching is that there is no them. There is only one. There is only one mind. There is only one heart. There is only one breath. There is only one beingness. And sometimes it's really hard to remember that. The world itself is a mirror into which we get to see ourselves reflected. Really sit with that for a minute. Everything that we see going on out there in the world that is upsetting and inspiring is ourselves reflected. It is all within us. Walt Whitman says we contain multitudes. I love that. And sometimes I'm really uncomfortable with some of my multitudes. You know, just really uncomfortable with them, with what I see. There is no other, really. Whatever is going on in the world, and in your heart, and in your job, and in your life, and in your relationships, there is no other. And I don't know about you, but that was really challenging for me this week. Really challenging. So what do we go back to? We go back to principle. We go back to the things we know. We go back to the things that we trust. We go back to the things that have anchored us in the past. And we know that evolving consciousness is happening all the time. It's not something we have to, quote unquote, make happen. Because it is happening right now. There is a consciousness within you that is evolving. And there is also a consciousness that our founding teachers of New Thought would have called human race consciousness. That is evolving as well. So we have this personal evolution that is going on within us, and we have this larger, the noosphere, what we're swimming in, that is also evolving. And those two things don't always line up. What's happening within us, now you've experienced this, yes? When you are in the midst of your own personal evolution, you recognize and you see something that you thought was true, that you realize, oh, that's not true. I actually am worthy. Oh, I actually can be abundant. Oh, I actually can be joy. And in those moments, that's when our transformation happens. And it is happening everywhere. But there's a whole lot of us points of light on this planet. And we're all on differing levels in our journey of evolving consciousness. So what we meet in the human race consciousness is what I like to call the mediocre. Because it's not the highs, and it's not the lows, but it's this sort of median thing. And that is not what we ultimately aspire to. We ultimately aspire here in this teaching to be the light, to be that which is up-leveling what that understanding of that median range is. So in that process, and some of you know this term, chemicalization. It's a very New Thought term. And what it means, I'm going to go right to like the short standard definition, right? It is a condition arising from the conflict that takes place when a high spiritual realization contacts an old error state of consciousness. So I'm going to say it again. It's a condition that arises from the conflict that takes place when a high spiritual truth comes in contact with an old state of error thinking. So when we collide in that way, there is this process that in New Thought, in Unity, we call chemicalization. And chemicalization looks a whole lot of ways. It looks like dissonance, which is what I was feeling this week. I was feeling a real sense of dissonance. I just, whoa, what? Like, and it made me unsteady. It made me really wobbly. It made me really like, whoa, what is what? And where is up and where is down? It can bring heightened emotions. Chemicalization can bring a real sense of charged emotional responses. It was one of the late night hosts was saying, like, I've never spent more time yelling at my TV than this past week. Heightened emotions are part of that process. And then there's also real physical conditions. We physicalize the conflict within our body temple. We get headaches, we get dizzy, we get tired. That was mine, right? We get tired, we get super amped up, where we're sort of spinning our wheels and running on all that charge. We can actually get rashes, we can get hives, we can get hair falling out, we can lose weight, we can gain weight, we can get, anybody experience this one? You have this major epiphany, and you're like, oh, I'm free from that. And the next day you come down with bronchitis. Like instantaneously, your whole body just goes, because it's trying to accept and embrace this higher level of consciousness. So I believe that what we are experiencing is a cultural chemicalization. Because just the same way within you, you are continually unearthing those false beliefs, and you are continually looking at them and seeing them, so too within our culture are those false ideas of truth arising and emerging. And as they come into contact with the higher understanding of what life is and what joy is and what equality is and what freedom is, as they come into contact, there is this chemicalization. And it's happening culturally. And there have been other times in our American history where that chemicalization, that cultural chemicalization, when you think about what happened during Vietnam, that was a cultural chemicalization. The old and the new colliding and creating so much dissonance, so much getting turned over. And the thing we want to remember is that this is a natural part of the process. This is the natural process of how we evolve in consciousness. We do not always have to be in conflict. But when we are, right, when that conflict does happen, we want to name it and own it, because otherwise, it is owning us. And that was what I was wrestling with this whole week. Was the chemicalization that I was feeling going to own me? Or was I going to own it? Was I going to stand in it? I want to read you, it's a little long, but Emily Cady, who is one of our founding teachers, had this beautiful quote, a beautiful explanation of what chemicalization is, and I thought, this is just so good. Suppose a man has lived in error thought and molded his body by error thought for years, until, as you might say, he has become solidified in that error belief. You introduce the truth to him as it has been taught, meaning through new thought teachings, the very newness of it, and because it is truth, creates in the first few days, months, new hope, new joy, and health. How many people in here experienced that for themselves? When you first found this teaching, it was like doors opening up in your life. And after a little time, a sort of mental ferment, I love that, mental ferment, or agitation takes place. One is apt to feel nervous and seared way down in the depths of himself. If he has ever been sick, he will begin to feel old diseases. If he has ever been morally bad, then old desires and habits will take possession of him with new force. If he has been holding denials and affirmations about business affairs until they have looked hopeful, all at once they collapse and seem darker and more hopeless than ever. All the new beliefs that lifted him into a new world seem failures. And he seems on the very verge of breaking up everywhere. What has happened? Simply this. There has been a clash between the old condition, based on falsehood, fear, and error thinking, and the new thought of truth entering into you. The old mortal personality is kicking vigorously against the truth. Anybody know that feeling?
Yes.
You have a feeling of discouragement, fear, a feeling such as one would have if caught in something not particularly reputable. Do not be frightened. That which you feel is, on the spiritual plane, a similar excitement and agitation to that which was seen in the chemical action between alkali and acid on the material plane. Something higher and better always results. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. Yes.
Something higher and better always results. But in order for that to happen, because we're talking about challenges, not just, look, what came up this week in the news is what came up this week in the news. What came up in my jobs this week was what came up in my jobs. But we are all, in every area of our life, offered challenges. Continually, in work, family, our relationships, our finances, our health, right? In every dimension of our life, challenges will arise because they're part of our growth and evolution. They are part of how we get to show up in a new consciousness. What it asks of us is that we are able to respond to what is arising rather than reacting to what is arising. So when we are reacting, we are usually, you know the difference, right? When you're reacting to something, it's just woof. It's like it just moves through you. And when that happens, it's an opportunity to take a look at how you are making the other other. How are you pushing something onto them and refusing to take some ownership within yourself? Reacting is a classic signature sign that you are wrestling with the shadow, that you are not actually operating from your clearest, most centered, most authentic space, that you are actually engaging with the shadow, the thing that you push off of yourself. And I'm going to be teaching a class on the shadow this fall. I'm going to be teaching a class, and because it's deep, powerful work, and in this time and in any time, it is so necessary that we cultivate the skills to be able to recognize when are we pushing off onto someone else? When are we not standing in it? When we're able to respond, and when we're responding from clarity, we're responding from respect, we're responding from a place of love and compassion. And it's a very different experience when we respond to something as opposed to react to it. All of this requires that we are anchoring a higher truth, that we are anchoring spiritual principles, that even in, as Emily Cady was saying, as we start practicing these truth principles and things actually start to fall apart on us even more. I cannot tell you the number of people, congregants I've had come to me and go, okay, I've been doing the work and my life has gone to hell. Like, what is going on? And I say, oh, it's working. It's working. Because it's got to break apart. It's got to break open in order for something new to emerge. If you think about growing something in your garden, if you have dirt and soil that is so baked and hard and you can't access it, how is something new supposed to grow there? Even if you sprinkle all kinds of nice, pretty dirt on top of it, it doesn't mean that there's any place for something to really take root and to grow. We are continually invited to be broken open. So we have to anchor and support this idea of a higher spiritual truth. And that really does mean compassion and love and possibility and joy. That is the space that we are invited, not just with words, not just with lip service, really being that compassionate space. Can you have compassion for all sides? Because there are no sides, so they're in quotes. Can you have compassion for all sides? Can you open your heart? Challenging, yes. This is the work. This is the work. As we know here, what we resist persists. Even if we're resisting it from the best of ideas and understanding, if we are in resistance, we are giving it energy. We are fueling the power of it. The law is the law, folks. Whatever you place your attention on grows. It does not discriminate. Whatever you're placing your attention on grows. Where have you been placing your attention? Mine was a struggle this week, that I had to keep trying to call myself back. Where am I placing my attention? And not checking out at the same time. Not going absent. Finding a way within myself to really contain those two seeming opposites. Because what we transcend will fall away. It will just fall away. It doesn't exist anymore. You've experienced this in your own life. When there was a problem, and 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 then you transcend it, and you're like, wow, that was a problem? Huh. Because it dissolves into nothing. So, what really struck me This is from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. Lots of parallels, clearly, and similarities to what's been up this past week. With malice toward none. Just that first one is hard, right? With malice towards none. With charity for all. And I love this next line. With firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Not that we have it all figured out, folks. Not that we know it all. We are evolving and growing as well. Our capacity to the best of our ability to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. Ha. So how do we stay rooted in this binding up? Because it's so easy to be a part of the division. It's so easy to just sort of fall into whatever side of the spectrum you're living on. It doesn't matter. The minute we see ourselves on a side, we're not binding up. And so I was really challenged this past week, as my wife can attest. I was really struggling to how to hold this. What would ground me? What would anchor me? As I was saying, I was wobbly. And do you guys remember weebles? Yeah. Right? Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. That sort of kept buzzing through my head. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Right? I'm wobbling, but I am not falling down. I am not going to fall down. I am going to anchor myself. So I came across this on YouTube. And if you haven't seen this talk, it's former Navy Admiral William H. McRaven. It's his commencement speech at the University of Texas at Austin from 2014. And he's written a book. And it was the perfect antidote for me in that moment of like, right? And he talks about that what we need to be doing in our lives at all times, because he's not specifically addressing a challenge specifically, but he's saying that what we need to do in every moment of our life is start with the little things. The little things. Really accomplish the little things. So what do you think is the thing that he says that we should do every single day? Make your bed. Yeah, everybody knows him, right? Make the bed. I love that. Make the bed. Just that. Make your bed. Because the little things can change your life. Make your bed. Make your bed well. Make your bed. Because when you do the little things well, it's easier to do the larger things well. And he has this moment where he says, and even if you have the day from hell, when you come home, your bed is made. There's a place to land. My wife is nodding at me.
Does she?
So I started to think about the little things in my life, and I realized in the midst of challenges, and in the midst of stress, and in the midst of the busyness that is our life, and in the midst of all that we have going on, because we all have so much going on, I look at my calendar and I think, what is this? So we all have so much going on, and the piece that I found for myself that was falling by the wayside, which I am offering to you, and it feels in some ways small, but again, it's the little things that can change your life. And that is the spiritual practice of self-care. I don't know about you, but I haven't been taking very good care of myself for the past week. The one thing I had that grounded me is I've been on a cleanse. And I have to tell you, I wanted to break that cleanse on several occasions. I wanted to stress eat like you cannot believe. But I stuck with my spiritual practice of self-care. There were other areas where I wasn't quite as on target. So we tend to minimize how important it is to actually take care of ourselves. And it's going to look different for each of you. It's not going to look the same. We have our physical dimensions we need to take care of. We have our emotional life we need to take care of. We have our mental, psychological well-being that we need to take care of. And all of that, for me, falls under the umbrella of our spiritual care. Because the spiritual care hits all of them. So in our physical well-being, what can we do to support our physical well-being? Sleep. This is the number one thing that causes stress and anxiety and creates illness. There have been all these studies that show that if you do not get enough sleep, you are not functioning at your optimal beingness. And the way you know how much sleep you need, because we're all different, is you do an alarm diet for 3 days. You go to bed at night, you wake up in the morning whenever you wake up. You go to bed the next night, you wake up the next morning whenever you would. You go to bed the night before, and when you wake up on the next morning, you will have made up most of your sleep loss, and that's how much time you need to sleep. That's what your body needs to actually get the rest that it needs. What else? We got sleep. Exercise. And there's so many ways we can exercise. You can exercise just by walking. You can exercise by doing a yoga and maybe combining meditation and something else along with it, right? There's all these ways that we can exercise. Singing. Yeah. What else supports our physical well-being?
Playing. Healthy eating.
Healthy eating. The choices that we make with food. I mean, all of this stuff seems really self-evident, yes? And yet it's the first thing that goes. The first thing that goes. We don't get enough sleep, right? We're not eating the way we're supposed to be eating. Our exercise gets cut in on because we're too busy. Our schedules are too full. We don't go to the acupuncturist or to the massage therapist, or we don't take care of ourselves. And then meditation and prayer. When we meditate, we are literally allowing our body to come to rest in a way that is so powerful and rejuvenative. And prayer does the same thing for us. So in addition to our physical well-being, we have our emotional well-being. And what can we do to support our emotional life? Cry, absolutely. Take time and process, right? Journal, write, share with your friends, call up. I mean, this whole thing about the feelings that were coming up, screaming at your television, you get to do that. You absolutely get to do that. Like, do it, like acknowledge it. But don't stop there. Don't stop there. That's the beginning of the work, not the end point of the work. So we've got journaling, sharing with friends. Here's a big one. Turn off the news. Turn it off. They talk about how with our continuous news cycles that it actually creates repeated trauma as we watch and we watch and we watch and we watch. Control how that information, stay abreast of what's happening. I'm not talking about disappearing, but I'm talking about carefully monitoring what it is that you are taking in and when you're taking it in. Do something you love. Go sing, right?
Laugh.
Go laugh,
Yeah.
right? Go to a movie. Do something silly, right? Yeah. I mean, all of these things serve our emotional well-being. And then guess what? Meditate and pray. Prayer is a powerful way to shift our emotional life. It's a powerful way to realign ourselves. And then we have our mental well-being, right? So what can we do? I'll let you guys see what I put up there. What can we do mentally to support ourselves?
Meditate and pray.
Meditate and pray. Yes, see? Oh, Nelson. You see a pattern?
Bust negative mental patterns.
Yeah, we can step into our affirmations and our denials. That's all mental work. We can actually aggressively step into those processes. What else can we do for mental health?
Ask for support too.
Ask for support? Absolutely, right? Get the help. If you're feeling alone, if you're feeling lost, connect with people because you are not alone, right? We're never alone. Susan?
Attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude. Yeah. Get that clear in your mind. What are your blessings right now? Is that going to also feed your emotional life?
Yeah.
Absolutely. All of these are connected. We can't really separate them out. We're just doing that because it's a fun activity and it's easier on the PowerPoint slides. Read books. Take a nap. They say that the naps in the middle of the day are one of the best things you can do for mental clarity. Take a nap. Don't push yourself past the point where you're not actually cognitively truly able to be present. And then we have meditate and pray.
Sense of play.
Sense of play, yeah, absolutely. That's part of that emotional experience, right?
Yeah.
So meditation and prayer in our teaching is making the bed. That is how we make the bed. We meditate, we pray, we do it consistently. Even if all you do is meditate for 1 minute a day, if you're consistent with it, it will become an anchor for you in the midst of whatever is arising. Even if your prayer is just, I am so grateful for all of my blessings, that becomes an anchor for you. But we need to cultivate the practice of it. The same way you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth. Would you leave the house without brushing your teeth? You just wouldn't. You just really, really wouldn't. Something would stop you at the door. No matter how late you were, no matter how overworked you were, no matter how stressed you were, you would not leave the house without brushing your teeth. Don't leave the house without meditating and praying. Don't cut yourself off from one of the greatest tools that we have to align ourselves with whatever is arising that's challenging for us. So, I don't know if you guys know about Palden Gyatso. He's a Tibetan Buddhist monk. Here's a picture of him. Look at that face. Would you even begin to imagine that he spent 33 years in a Chinese prison being tortured all the time? He has a book, and he does speaking tours, and what he speaks to is that in the midst of the torture, he says that he would hate his torturers. And then he would be dumped back into his cell, and he would meditate. And what he would discover was his compassion for his torturers. His compassion for the fact that they couldn't see past what they were doing. His compassion for the fact that they were caught in such a limited understanding of what was possible in the world. His compassion for the fact that they thought that violence achieved anything. And he held compassion, real compassion, for people who did horrible, horrible things to him, personally, not on an idea level. And it was his meditation practice that anchored him through that entire experience. It was meditation that allowed him to be compassion in action, to show up in a way that not only served him, but look at what just that entire movement of Tibetan Buddhist monks, who are all practicing this, look at what they have brought to our world in the midst of their most challenging times. Maybe not their most, but certainly very challenging times. Look at what they have brought to us because they stood anchored in love. And when they found themselves wobbling into hate, they would meditate and they would align themselves and they would call themselves home. Look at that man's face.
It's amazing what happens.
That's why, because their hatred, their indifference, their whatever was coming at him never really touched him. And he knew it. And he would forget it. I love this story because he would forget it. And then he would remind himself again. This is is what we are invited into all the time. That we can move through the challenges of our life that sometimes, let me tell you, they do feel like torture. Yes? They feel that painful. And that we can be this shining, joyous beacon of light, making a difference in the world. A real difference in the up-leveling consciousness in a way that is just transcendent. When we nourish ourselves, we nourish the world. That's how it works. If we're not practicing self-care, if we're not paying attention to the places in our life where we let it fall away, we do not have it within us to do anything else. We will burn out rather than shine brightly. And it is from that place that we become compassion in action. And we are up-leveling the world right now. Martin Luther King's fabulous quote, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." When you look for this quote, most people leave off the "in reality." The famous part of the quote is, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. I love that he said "in reality." He's saying not in some airy-fairy idea land. He is saying in time and in space, in reality. That, to me, is the most powerful part of that quote. That's what we're called to anchor. Malice towards none, charity for all. That is how we will break this starless midnight of racism and war. That is what? Because we are the daybreak, folks. We are the light. We are the sun rising. We are that which will completely dissolve away all that is false, all that is not true. When we say yes, a way is made out of seeming no way. A way is made out of the intractable duality and polarization. But we get to do the work. We are the ones who are called to stand in the midst of that chemicalization, to stand in the midst of all of our own challenges, and to anchor compassion and love for all. And when we live and breathe and move from that place, we are beacons of light. We are beacons of light. And the darkness is obliterated in a heartbeat. When you turn on a light in a room, does the darkness slowly fade away? No, it's gone. We are that light. That is what we have within us. So my invitation to all of us, really myself, but I'll take you along on the journey if you like, is that we just keep asking the question, what is mine to do in this? Not from reaction, not from fear and lack and smallness, but what is mine to do from that place of anchored love? How am I called to show up in reality, in time, in space, and transform this world, bind up the wounds of this nation? Because we have that capacity within us. It is happening. And we get to say, let's accelerate that process even more.